us, but we will continue to do that. So you'll get the chance to hear about it several times, because we all know it takes multiple hearings and learnings to really get it, to really learn it. And so we're going to be kind of doing it gradually so you can get the hang of it. Okay, so oh, it's Diana's turn now. It's Diana's turn to show us
Sure.
what she learned in TSDM.
So what I'm going to do is Teaching the Skills That Matter required us to create a video highlighting some of the high points of our learning and of the lessons that we had created. So I want to share with you one of my video first. Creating this video was a learning experience for me because, hey, it was new technology. It was Zoom. It's on Loom, so it was new, and thank goodness Amy
Thank you
knows
for joining
how.
me today. My name is Diana Stralick, and I work at the Center for New America.
So I just want to check, are you able to
Dakota.
hear? Everything is good? Okay, I'll go back to the beginning. I wanted to make it full screen.
Thank you for joining me today. My name is Diana Stralick, and I work at the Center for New Americans in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My students are SLIFE students, refugees, immigrants. We have a little English and sometimes no literacy skills. Well, there's so much to know. To begin with, my students had a variety of things they needed to learn. They needed to learn some of this academic language so that they could actually communicate with each other, negotiate an understanding, negotiate a solution to the problem. This was very fun and very interesting, and trying to figure out the scaffolding to make this language that they would truly understand. So it takes a team to build this type of comprehension. A lot of time, the understanding of the vocabulary is there, but then they have to put that back into English to describe what they understand. It was very useful using first language translations between the students. And of course, we determined some words were big English, and then we discovered the small English that would go with it, that would help us to describe or to define the words that we were talking about. I felt that being able to communicate and negotiate a feeling, an opinion or a solution was a very strong foundation that I needed to create first, because it was the vital piece about how to complete every lesson that was going to be given, especially if they were problem-based lessons. The content was one thing, but knowing how to utilize the skill to the best of their ability was something we needed to work on. I started with giving them sentence frames, started to have them understand that this was an opinion and that opinions were good. Why was this important for them? This was new territory, or so they thought. They struggled with being able to talk to each other without the teacher telling them if their opinions were right or if their opinions were wrong. They struggled with wanting to know why we're learning this skill. They didn't have school before, and their opinion of coming to school was to learn English words so that they could talk to people outside of the classroom. So So the idea of practicing a skill was a new idea for them. First things first, we had to decide, what agreement meant, what disagreement meant, about opinions, whether they were good or bad, or how you give an opinion, how you accept an opinion respectfully. We came up with this collective understanding. We took big academic words and put it into small English. Now we had to practice. We had to practice by ourselves in the breakout room without the teacher. There's many topics, many questions, many different classmates, volunteers, until we were comfortable. Then we could come back out of the breakout rooms and talk to the teacher about what we did, how we communicated, what we agreed upon. Then we decided to take a look inside, and we discovered that we negotiate all the time. We negotiate with our children, with our husbands, with our siblings. So negotiation wasn't something new. It was new in the realm of the setting of a school. They do it all the time out in their own personal lives. So then it became really relevant for them, and they understood this skill was not new. It was just being practiced in a new setting. This unleashes the power. It helps them to realize that they truly do know more than what they think they know. And just because maybe they have not gone to school before in their life, they still have these skills. They just need to understand the English terms for those skills and how and when we might be able to use those skills outside of the normal environment that we use them in. So my advice to all teachers, for all adult learners, show your students how to unleash the power of their skills.
What I found for my students when I taught them how to negotiate was, I don't want to say that they were so excited to practice this ability to negotiate, this ability to communicate with each other. When we first started, I would put them in a breakout room and they wouldn't know where to start. And they would come back and I would ask those questions on our self-awareness grid, and they wouldn't be able to answer them or to commit that they talked to each other or that they actually even negotiated or shared their opinions. But now they do it all the time, and they don't wait to go to a breakout room. They will now talk to me and ask an opinion, ask for clarification. So now they're already now starting this negotiation aspect as an academic learner. So they're seeing that value, but I had to start really, really low at like that point for them to understand the skill. Like I said, they had it. They just hadn't practiced it in an academic setting. So for them, it was a win. It's increased their ownership of their own learning. Instead of waiting for me to give the answers, they're asking questions that are not even maybe in our packet. That's now something that they need, that's something that's relevant for them out in the real world that I'm not aware of. And so they bring that to the classroom, and it enhances our lessons, enhances our time together. The other thing I want to share is my goals for teaching these skills. One, it's great for their academics, but two, that's so important for them to be out when they have it out in the workforce. To be able to negotiate with a manager some time off, or to be able to negotiate with the doctor. Should I take that medicine or shouldn't I? So I just feel like it's an important skill and I need to look at those skills as look at the skill as to how they can use it outside of my classroom, even though that's where they're learning how to use it. We always bring it back. Where will you use that skill now? Where will you use that skill now? In the lesson that I taught, it was on eating on a healthy budget. And it was fun to watch them negotiate what was healthy, what wasn't, how much money to spend on one thing or another. And as they got comfortable doing it, we came up to some really good discussions, especially when it comes to sugar and American food and how to determine if that package is cheap or not cheap, like negotiating how large is the package and what is the money that you have to pay for that package, and will that feed my whole family, or do I need 2 boxes? So there was a lot of conversations going on. Then when I teach this lesson again, I can use the same lesson and they've already got 1 skill, and now I can create a new skill. So that's the one thing I like about the 9 skills, is they don't have to all be taught at one time, that you can build a skill. If you recycle that lesson, they can stick in another skill. So you're only teaching 1 new thing at a time. But are there any questions that you would have for me?
Diana,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit more about that intermediary step between when they would return, they wouldn't even commit to having practice? I mean, was it then a lot of group work that focused on modeling the negotiation processes? I mean, I'm really excited about the scope of this and how you've included numeracy in mathematics, which is an explicit mandate, requirement, purpose of WIO now. So anyway, can you build a little bit on that for me?
Right. We did a lot of group practice. The trick I found, as I continued to go into the breakout rooms, incognito, I would go in without my camera and without my microphone to see what was going on. And I realized that culturally, the students that I had didn't want to be the one to step forward and be the leader. So I learned that I needed to, as I sent them out, they could do the skill whole group, but I needed to send them out with a leader. Okay, you start asking the question first. I also found that sometimes if they're on phones, if they didn't see the other person, they didn't know that the other person had joined them in the breakout room. So these were the little stumbling. It was more about the technology and more about a cultural response to being the leader than it was for them being able to do the skills. So it just took a little while for me to figure out why my students were not participating in the classroom. But I wouldn't have known that if we hadn't had that self-awareness piece on the back end of that breakout room. So it wasn't just a matter of teaching the skill and putting them in, but it was also bringing them back and helping them to be aware of their learning. Like, what did you do? And how was that successful? So did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And it sort of reinforces, I think, maybe Andrea's point yesterday, the exercise, and where we should consider being very explicit about taking those leadership roles and then alternating and all. Yeah, good. Okay.
Yeah. There was a question about what skills you think about teaching next. I haven't thought about the skill for this lesson next, because I think that would depend on how I want to reteach it, to recycle that information. So depending upon how what I look at and how I want to teach on that will determine whether I teach more of the problem solving skills or if I to teach navigating systems, depending upon what I want to put in there to increase the lesson. That's a good question though. If there aren't any more questions, Amy has a great video to share. So, Laura.
Yeah, I am muted. I wanted to ask you a quick question. maybe later you were going to do this, but I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the self-awareness chart that you mentioned.
Mhm, sure. So before we started this, my students did not ever participate in a breakout room without a teacher or a volunteer. And so talking with my mentor for TSTM, she encouraged I and Amy to use this self-awareness grid. So we discussed the grid prior to going into the breakout room. These are the questions I'll ask you. And we modeled that by doing our whole group. And then I would ask the questions. Did we negotiate? Did we find the answer? Did we talk in English? Did we talk to each other? So I just talked the three points, and I tried to keep it very simple. You can make that grid as long as you wanted to. Did you solve a problem if you were doing it as final assessment? But so I taught it, I modeled it, we worked it together. Then when they came back from the breakout room, they knew that I would ask it. And you have to be very consistent. You have to ask it every time so that they understand that that is really important. So thank you for that question, Laura.
Can you say the points on the grid again? They were a little bit fast for me. What were the 3 points?
I believe I had one was, did we talk English to each other, right? Because I had some students who had the same first language and I wanted to make sure that they spoke in English. I wanted to find out whether or not they negotiated with each other to come up to a solution. And I can't remember.
Diana, if you'd like, I could quick screen share
Oh, yes, please.
some of it. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think if that was the 3 I used, the one you're going to screen share.
This, yeah, it's
This is a little bit different, but this would be an example of what a grid could look. But you would teach that. We worked together, right? The directions, we did exactly what the teacher asked us to do, and that we were able to bring those ideas back to the teacher. So with these 3 goals that they would have to obtain while they're in the breakout room, but you would model that, you would work that as a whole group. You would have a whole group discussion, then you would go to the self-awareness. And so that they could learn what they needed to work harder on next time they were in the breakout room. So it wasn't just the conversation that they were having, but they were also learning how and what needed to be done so that they could complete the task. Thank you, Amy. I think that's probably the one Amy used in her oral 3 classes, a little bit higher. Yeah. But it has the same thought process. Yeah, not yet. It's because learning is an ongoing. It's not mastered the first time around, and we needed to let the students know that that was okay. We're learning something new, and we're going to practice, no problem.
And Diana, I think that's something that we as teachers need to remind ourselves too, when teaching a complex thing like this, that it's not going to be pretty the first time, that it's going to be messy, and it's going to take multiple times of that process of modeling and practicing, and then coming back and reflecting together on how it worked. Because I think so many times we want it to just work the way we think in our heads it should be, and it's not going to be that way the first time. It is a process for all of us, and to remind yourself as a teacher, like, oh, they didn't get it yet,
Right?
But we're going to keep working on it, and they will get it. I think is an important thing for all of us to remember.
It is, and it's interesting. You think you have it scaffolded as far as you need to go, and then you find that you need to go down a little bit more, and that's amazing that eventually the students are going to help you understand quicker, because they're going to start speaking up for themselves and having that self-awareness of what I need to know and what I don't understand. So yeah. Okay, Amy.
all right. So Diana's level, as far we did TSTM, both of us, in our oral classes. So those classes focus on oral skills. almost exclusively. So we have maybe a variety of literacy skill levels in our classes. But orally, Diana's students, according to the best plus, they're say ESL 2 and 3. And my level was one step up, and mine were ESL levels 4 and 5, roughly, in my class. So I'll show you the video and then we'll discuss it. I think I will. Oh man, here it is. Okay. So I'm going to start playing. If you don't hear it, please let me know. Hi, I'm Amy Quiroga at the Center for New Americans in South Dakota. And today I'm going to talk about implementing TSTM in an online low literacy oral ESL classroom. This is my current teaching context. I'm teaching from home from my spare bedroom, and my students are learning online as well. So who are my students? They're from all over the world. They're not at the level to study for the GED yet. According to the NRS, they're at an oral intermediate level, and many are SLIFE. And if you haven't heard of SLIFE, it stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. SLIFE students tend to have higher oral abilities than literacy. They tend to have lower tech literacy, and they learn well by hearing and doing, which is kind of their superpower. So if a student spent most of their life like this or like this, and now they're trying to learn English like this and learn all of these words and terms and use them, that is quite a challenge. But they are very resilient and they're happy to see their teacher, and we are happy to see them, and it is working. They are learning. So challenges to implementing TSTM lessons in this context. As I said, we're currently online only, which makes group work difficult. Students have low reading ability. They're using phones. Probably 90 to 95% of our students are using mobile devices, not laptops, and that makes logistics a bit more challenging. There are home distractions, and as I said, the students tend to have low tech literacy. An issue for materials is if the teacher shows text on the screen, we just have to keep in mind that it is a very small rectangle on an already small screen. So that's a challenge. So for my students, can they switch apps on the phone to look other things up in class? Nope. What about taking notes in an online platform? Nope. Taking notes on paper? Questionable. For students with lower literacy, that is more distracting than helpful. It tends to be. So how to modify the lessons? We had to create content. So we created level and circumstance appropriate content on the topic. We used lots of images instead of words. Group work is oral based rather than reading or writing based. And we focused on communication skills that are appropriate for many different situations. So our first unit, which is one lesson in the toolkit and in our program, in my class, it ended up being a 1-month unit on event planning. And we chose this partly because it's fun. Who doesn't love an event? And also it applies to all students in every culture. Everyone has planned something. So in this lesson, the central skills from the toolkit, we focused on communication and self-awareness. And the language demands, of course, are foundational in an ESL classroom. So we're looking at vocabulary and use of polite negotiation and disagreement language. So here's a snippet of a sheet from our packet. We sent packets home for with students for the month. So for the entire month of January, they had their materials. Vocabulary with limited words and pictures. We definitely used the adaptations suggested in the toolkit for lower literacy levels. This was kind of the foundation of the month of January for my level, my class. Language to agree and disagree. the sentence frames here, and language to give an opinion and ask for an opinion. Once we practiced that polite language, we used it to do activities together, and the teachers went dark. Turned off our camera, turned off our mic, and the students had to negotiate by themselves using this language. So here's an example of what I had my students do. They had to talk about these in breakout rooms in Zoom using their polite language, and I observed them. Or an activity like this, put these steps, the steps of event planning in order and discuss why. Here's a bit of a capstone activity for the month for my class. Here's the situation. Carol wants to have a party, and the students had to discuss as a group, in smaller groups, when she should have the party, how much money she should spend, where and who should come. And then they had to report back to the group what they had decided and negotiated. After each discussion, group discussion, we practiced self-awareness using these self-assessment questions, and this was also in their packet for the month. Especially this aspect of everyone talked in teamwork, that was kind of an eye-opener for them. That was an aha moment. Some students tended to dominate group discussion and others kept quiet, and this showed them that, oh, that is not ideal. That is not what we should be doing. So they really made a big improvement in that area, and they were good at asking each other's opinions. Okay, we also worked on giving directions in a polite way. Could you, would you, and do you have time to? And then again, using images and few words, practice giving polite directions in groups. And then next up is taking away the written prompts using the pictures only. Before TSTM, to sum up, my students relied on the teacher or volunteer for leadership in group discussion. They did not solve problems by themselves. They usually did not self-evaluate, and some students tended to dominate group talking time. However, after TSTM instruction and activities, I saw big improvements. Students intentionally include all group members in discussion. They use more polite language when stating their ideas. They're more open to other opinions, which was an unexpected side effect. I think it's the students are learning that there is not just one right answer. And students work independently much more successfully. So best of all, they see that they have improved a lot and they feel good. TSTM was a great success. Thanks for watching. Okay. Everybody just loves to hear themselves talk, right? Okay. Well, now I see that I got a chat. Were you able to see that video? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So. I'm seeing some so-sos. Sorry about that. Right. So, yeah, TSTM. Obviously, that I made that video in March regarding the unit we did in January. So that's been a little while now. We're no longer teaching from home and no longer only online, although we do still have a lot of Zoom students. Yeah, so as Diana said, well, even for my students at an intermediate oral level, it was tricky. It took quite a bit of scaffolding to get them to work by themselves, to work independently, and to negotiate conversation with each other in breakout rooms. To use that language that was in the agree and disagree chart that I showed you, like actually I can show it again. Let's see. Oops, I scrolled down, so now I have to go back up. Okay, so here's the whole sheet. Just so you can see the whole sheet. How do you speak politely in a group? This is my slightly revamped version. And then here's a little bit of a blow up of it. So we started just with agree. I like that idea. I think you're right. Sounds good. Sounds good was actually an addition from one of my students. He had heard that a lot at work and he said, teacher, I hear people say sounds good. And I'm like, wow, you're so right. We say that all the time. So I added it to my chart. So even to get them to say, I like that idea. I think you're right. We had to practice. That's the first step. If you hear something that you agree with, say this instead of just saying yes or okay. And those things are okay too, but the first step is let's use this English. This is really good. So I said something that maybe everybody would agree with, like, I think LSS needs to give every student free coffee in class. What do you say? You say, I like that idea, or whatever. Just something that you're sure everyone can agree with. And then even then, they wouldn't say, oh yeah, they would say, oh good. What's the English on your paper? Remember? Oh yeah, I have to say, I like that idea, or whatever. This is at an intermediate, right? NRS levels 4 and 5. So we started small, right? You start really small and work your way up. And by the end of that month, this is a month-long process, they were able to use at least all students were able to use at least one agreement and disagreement phrase from that chart. And several of the students were able to use multiple ways of saying those things, how to agree and disagree politely. Yeah, and for disagreement, we had to do the same thing. Like I would maybe say, I think ice is good. This is January, right? I think ice is good. I'm pretty sure that everybody's going to not agree with that. So then they have to practice using their disagreement sentences. Yeah, so it starts there. As far as what you could see from my video, that the skills that we worked on most out of the 9 were communication and self-awareness. And self-awareness was through the chart that Diana and I both used. Communication, of course, is in an ESL classroom. That's a whole different, that's pretty important. So yeah, the agreement and disagreement. And with our TSTM coach, she was very good about telling us, you know what, it's going to be messy at first. When the first time that you put them in the breakout room by themselves, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be messy. It's not going to be pretty, but that's where you start, right? That's where they first get the idea, oh, the teacher's not going to come and bail me out this time. You know, we really do have to do this. Yeah, but by the end, it was so different. Okay, I see a comment. The idea that everyone speaks is one of our cultural norms. I did not. I don't think we did get any pushback about that being a goal. Good question. I think they saw that to practice English, you need to, you're right, you need to actually speak, and that everybody's important here. And so we want to hear everybody's idea. So yeah, that worked out fine. It really was an aha moment for them though, when they saw that on the chart.
And I'm not suggesting that anybody would have said anything. That's why I said, did you feel any
Right,
pushback? Because a lot of our students come from cultures where, for example, women they're not supposed to speak. And the women themselves sometimes believe that. And then definitely the men can kind of override them.
Sure. Yeah,
But
I
you
did
didn't have
not.
that issue.
In my situation, at least, I didn't get much of that. I do have an overwhelming number of female students, but not only. Yeah. So no, good question though. I think my students at least were able to see the value of that, so they could understand why that was important. Right. So one thing that we kind of were thinking about was the TSTM lessons often have sort of an end product or a final group product in order for the students to show how do the students demonstrate their learning, or how can you tell that the students learned what you wanted them to learn? And so Diana and we were talking together and thinking, okay, we're on Zoom. We don't have reading and writing things to be able to be an end product, or how do we show that they learn these things? So in our case, or specifically in my case, it was, of course, it's all oral based. And so my students had to plan an event. And since it was COVID, we can't have a real event, of course. So it's a pretend event. Plan an event together using all the steps. So they have to use the steps of event planning that we had talked about in the unit, and of course, using this negotiation, agreement, and disagreement language. So for example, I'm going to go back to my page here. So this is an example of maybe one of my final group products, if you can call it that. And I showed this briefly in my video as well. Of course, it has writing on it, but we read it together, and it's relatively simple. So the students had to decide together, when should she have the party, how much money, where, who should come. So I give them, let's say, 6 or 7 minutes, maybe in a breakout room together, without me, without a volunteer. They discuss this and discuss their ideas and what do they think. Of course, at that point, they were used to this, so it wasn't scary or too difficult. And then after 6 or 7 minutes, the breakout rooms closed and they come back, and they have to, one person who, sometimes I did assign them. Of course, at the beginning, I often did assign, but toward the end, I was able to tell them, okay, when you go into the room, you decide who is the leader, who is gonna share your ideas when you're finished, who's gonna tell the rest of the class what you decided, and things like that. So they had to decide that themselves, and they got faster at that. So when they come back, then they explain what did they decide, and if they don't tell us why, we can ask, why did you decide that much money? Why did you decide you should have the party, whatever, in your living room, or whatever they decided. So that used all the skills that we practiced in that unit. So that was sort of our end product. And if the students were able to do that politely, right, and all participate in that activity, then I consider that to be showing me that they really learned it. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anything that I didn't flesh out as much as you'd like? Practicing my wait time. Okay, I think no. So, Diana, it's time for breakout discussions. Oh, you're muted. There we go.
So I need Becky, if she's available, to
I am here. So we need 2 breakout groups, right?
2 breakout groups, Amy for sure in one and I another, or we will move ourselves.
Okay. All right. About how much time do you want to spend?
How much we have, can you tell me how much time is left in the session?
You've got about 12 minutes till 10:30. Is that right? 10:30? No, we have 10:45. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. So you've got about 25, 27 minutes.
So we could do 15 minutes. You said 27 minutes?
Yep.
So we could do 15 in the breakout room and then we'll have 10 to do a full group. Before you put us in, I just want to give the instructions to the breakout room. So when we go to the breakout room, we're going to have 2 questions that we need to discuss. The first one is give an example of a time you taught these skills. The second one, let's see, Amy, while I'm doing this, do you want to type that into the chat maybe? Or
So Diana, just to clarify, by these skills, do you mean communication and self-awareness?
I think I'd like to open it to the 9 skills. Maybe you might have taught these skills in a different lesson, so I'd be interested to hear.
Okay.
And the second question is, did you have an end product? For example, like Amy had the problem that they had to discuss and then come back and share with the teacher. So in your lesson, do you include end products like this? And then Amy and I will also talk about our end products. Amy touched base on that a little bit. So Becky will break us into breakout rooms, and Amy will be with one and I will be with another. We'll kind of discuss these 2 questions.
All right, here we go.
Thank you, Becky.
Yep.
Let's see, did Amy, there she is.
I'm here.
Okay. So we wanted to take this time for people from each breakout room to share what they've heard and what they've discussed and maybe how they see that going into, into the future, or what were their experiences now. If you've heard some things that you'd like to share out from your breakout room, that would be awesome.
We should have assigned somebody to be the reporter.
Right, there you go. We should have signed someone to be the reporter. Hey, you can be the reporter. How about you, Royce? How about we'll just or maybe Susan, she's first.
I've got my mic off. I'll say something.
Okay, Laura, go for it.
I didn't know how else to say it. I've got my mic off.
Just like that. Sometimes I don't see the little red.
Yeah. One of my takeaways from the group discussion, it was really interesting hearing from a few of our members. One of my takeaways was Amy sharing her learning curve about making sure that the activity was complex enough that the students felt challenged and could practice the skills at hand, like negotiation, agree, disagree, and coming to a consensus on something. So I really appreciate that experience that she shared with us. I think that's helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. Susan, would you like to share anything?
Kate, she had some, I should let Kate tell what she did in her class. Kate, are you there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, go ahead, Kate.
Sure. So I was just talking about at LSS last month was our self-advocacy unit, which combined a lot of the TSTM skills like self-awareness, critical thinking, navigating systems, negotiation. And one of our final assignments in Lit 3, which at LSS is our middle of the road literacy class, is we had the students self-advocate in writing by writing boss and or a teacher or someone a text message basically saying I need help or I need time off or I have a problem. They were allowed to identify the person they wanted to talk to, what it was they wanted to talk about, and use polite language. They wrote their texts, and then we had a little writing rubric, very similar to the ones Diana showed. Did I do this? Yes, 100%. So, not yet. And yeah, it was a really good practice with those self-advocacy skills, but then also doing it in writing and not just orally. So having those multiple modalities was really good. And then also talked about a group project we did when we were doing the ideal problem solving. I think that was in March. I asked this like 10 minutes ago and then my brain just totally forgot. But yeah, the students worked together to identify a problem that one of them was having a real problem they felt comfortable sharing, coming up with solutions for the problem, what might happen if they take X solution, what the best solution was, and then later reporting what they learned after implementing the solution, which was really good critical thinking and problem solving skills.
And we talked about this being a good skill for the higher levels, maybe not for the basic levels, but the higher levels. And I talked about how when I taught ESL, I'm starting it again, we had a unit on health, and we learned vocabulary words that ask questions like when you go to the doctor. And I said, we didn't really have an end product, but at the end we had role playing, and somebody would be the doctor and ask, what are your symptoms? And the patient would have to answer, I have a temperature, I have a sore throat, or whatever. So that we decided was the end product with the role playing.
Yeah, I would say my students love that.
Yes, they do.
Especially when we were in person. Yeah, they would start to ad lib. It was really good.
Yep, I agree. It's fun.
Yeah, it is fun. Did anyone else want to share? I know that in our group, we did talk about the fact that some of these skills are already in our lessons. We just haven't taught them explicitly. So that was encouraging for the teachers to notice that, so that it realizing that it's not going to take extra time to maybe put the skill in. If the skill's already there, you just have to expound on it and make it a little bit larger. Mhm. And we did too talk about end products. They sometimes we don't. Heather asked the question about whether it needs to be one large product at the end, or could there be small ones along the way. And for myself, I would use, especially with my lowest levels, I'm just going to use little small ones because I want their memory to be working on that little small one. And then maybe we can add this product that they were able to master into this product, the next level. And then, but to have one huge one at the end, I would be nervous that my lowest level students would maybe find that overwhelming. But my high level students wouldn't. So. Are there any other thoughts or takeaways that you want to share? Is there anything I've forgotten to say, Amy, that I needed to add before we go into the next session?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have something.
I figured Becky might have something.
Danette is our winner for this session.
Woo!
Congratulations, Danette. Watch your email. You will get a special prize. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we've got a 15-minute break next. Everybody refresh yourselves and come back and we'll be ready to go. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you.